Hey everybody, it's Scott from SERPmedia.com. Today I'm going to be showing you how to fully set up and configure the All-in-One SEO Pack. All-in-One SEO Pack is the second most popular SEO plugin on the market, and for good reason. It has a lot of functionality, and it can be quite a bit confusing. So we're going to install it, activate it, and I'm going to go through all of its settings for you. When you first install it, you'll be met with this welcome screen. This is just promotional stuff that shows you can upgrade to the pro version or translate it. And then it gives you beginner documentation and their credits. We're going to skip this and go to the general settings. Now, one thing that needs to be understood about All-in-One SEO Pack is their add-ons, if you would, underneath the feature manager. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through the general settings, and then we'll go to the feature manager, and I'll go through each of the additional features after the fact. So in the general settings, you have the first setting, which is canonical URLs. You want the rel canonical link provided for posts for Googlebot. I recommend this option is enabled. No pagination for canonical URLs. What this will do is on paginated content, such as page 1, page 2, the canonical will be set to the parent. You shouldn't use this option. And then the use original title should be disabled. You want to overwrite the titles with whatever you're putting into All-in-One SEO Pack. And then you can log important events and changes. I don't recommend enabling this unless you're hiring maybe somebody to evaluate your SEO and make changes. Otherwise, I would just leave the option off. Under the home page settings, this is where you first get to optimize content for your website. It will actually modify what appears for the home page if and only if you're not using a static page. So if it says use static front page instead, it will use the keywords and the settings in your edit page. So we're using the Gutenberg builder here, and if you enable this option, you can set the option here. I recommend if you do have a static front page that you configure the options within the post editor. That way you get a little bit more options that are easier to see, as you can see here. And that way it's easier to maintain. You want to get into a habit of modifying your SEO content on a per post, per page basis instead of the broad rules. But speaking of which, we're going to go into these broad title tag rules. So the title tag rules are essentially auto-generated titles for different content types. Not all content types are going to really need them because some of them are just not going to be indexed. For instance, date archives, it doesn't really matter because you're not going to be indexing them. But if you want to do it for the sake of consistency, you can modify them here. The homepage title, you can set your format here. Whenever you hover over one of these question marks, it will show you the macros that are supported. Typically, what you want to do is something like, you want to do like the site title, and then whatever your separator is, whether you're using the up or this or a heart or a star, whatever you're using, and then you're going to do something like site description. And both of these settings can be controlled under the WordPress settings. One thing that you want to get another good feel for is using macros when you're modifying titles and pages. That way it will be bulk updated. So under your general settings, the tagline is the site description and the site title is the site title. And the benefit to modifying them this way is, as you can see, it went ahead and updated it here, but it allows you to reuse it and make large changes. So if you change your site's title or its tagline, you'll be able to bulk update them. So avoid injecting the site title, like I wouldn't write Gutenberg Playground on here because I already know that's the site title. But if I want to change that, I have to go back and edit this one post. So if you were at site title, in the ideal world, if this was Yoast SEO, it would rewrite it. But we already have the setting here to handle it. The page title format. This is a fine default page title format. It's the name, whatever your separator is. I prefer using the dash, and I'm just going to make that all the way down. Most of these default settings are completely acceptable for the titles. Most of the time, the title should incorporate whatever the title of the content is and whatever the name of your site is. And then on posts where the content's longer and it would be too large to include, say, the site title, you would want to rewrite it or omit the site title. So I'm just going to paste all these on here so they're there. Okay. So content type settings. You will only be able to modify the SEO via the edit for the content types that you enable here. You really only need to do it for posts, pages, and custom post types such as testimonials, clients, things that you've added to the site that are going to be publicly accessible and indexable. Your attachment content should never be indexed, and a lot of these are just non-functioning front-end content types. Users will never see WordPress forms light announcements or WordPress forms logs. So you don't need to enable the SEO content for editing for those. For the display settings, you'll be able to show columns, labels for the custom post types, the title, the SEO keywords, and description columns. Personally, I don't enjoy this feature solely because if you go to the edit, this looks very cluttered. It's a lot of stuff. I personally disable this, but if you're somebody who likes to have a moment's glance at the overall labels and descriptions for your pages, then you want to go ahead and enable it again with the same settings as up here. Webmaster verification tools, you'll be able to paste your verification IDs for various Webmaster tools, Baidu, Bing, Google, Yandex, and Pinterest. If you're using the site verification meta tag, this is where you would paste it. Personally, if you're trying to verify content lately, the inclusion of a CNAME record is going to be the best option. Google Analytics, if you want to add Google Analytics to your site, you can paste the code into here, just your UAID, and it will paste it in there. It saves you from needing to copy and paste the code elsewhere onto the site. There's not going to be really any advanced options for it. Personally, I either use Google Tag Manager and use the data layers, or I just paste it into the footer of the Genesis options. For the Schema.org settings, these are where you're going to have to do some manual configuration. You want to use Schema.org markup. You want to enable the site links search box in Google search. This will not show it up. This only adds the required markup for Google in case Google decides to show it. So if you enable this option, you very well might not have the site links search box in Google. But if Google eventually determines you have enough traffic and it's going to be useful for the users, it will enable it. You'll also need to paste your social profile links. As it mentions here, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, you'll add the lines here. You should paste in all your active social media URLs here and make sure that it's the clean URL. For Twitter, make sure that you are using the URL and not just your Twitter handle. For person or organization, this is going to be how you're describing your website. If it's a business site or if it's just a site about you personally, this is where you want to declare it. So if it's scotthartley.blog, I would honestly want to make it a person object type. But if I'm doing certmedia.com, it's going to be an organization type. And then you'll add the organization name, logo, and your phone number. You can also add a type of contact, which would be what this number is for. So for the most broad case, if you're not sure what to put customer support. And now comes to the no index settings. Certain types of content should be marked as no index. Sometimes this content should just be done by the beginning. For instance, attachment pages should not be indexed. User request should not be indexed. WordPress forms shouldn't be indexed. WordPress forms light announcements. WordPress form blogs, blocks. I don't know why it's, there he goes. Adding all of those options would be ideal. The only content on this site that I want indexed are the images, the post, and the pages. You do not want attachment pages to be indexed. Then there is a default to no follow. So you can no follow links from these content types. Ideally, these are basically the same. Oop, don't do your post. Now, this is where I'm going to change from their default. It says use no index for category archives. I suggest that you have categories indexed. Use no index for author archives. I recommend that they are indexed. I don't recommend using date archives. I don't recommend your search or your 404 pages to be indexed. And then it says use no index for taxonomy archives. Well, the first one is tags. If you had more taxonomies, they could be listed here. The only taxonomies you would want to no index are taxonomies that are used solely for backend organization. So if you have a custom post type, such as Avada, it uses a slider code and it's a custom post type for slide, and slider is a form of taxonomy. You would want to no index the slider category and the slider itself because it's content that doesn't stand as its own page. And then you would want to leave these options unchecked as well because you want your paginated post and pages to be indexed. Now, the auto-generate descriptions, check this, and your meta descriptions for any post type will be auto-generated using the post excerpt or the first 160 characters. I recommend enabling this option because in the event if you're installing an SEO plugin on a site that you have thousands of posts for, or you've just never used an SEO plugin in the first place, you'll want to have something in the meta description tag. Otherwise, Google will just attempt to generate one. Even if you add a meta description, if Google determines that meta description is useless, it will override it anyways. But in most situations, an auto-generated from the first whatever sentence or two of content is the most useful. It says that it can use the content for auto-generated. This will generate from your post content instead of the post excerpt. I recommend this option gets enabled as well. Particularly for Genesis themes, the Excerpt module is used to display content in a variety of places that isn't in the content or for post archives. So in most situations, the content with the first sentence is the recommended form. And then it mentions remove descriptions for paginated content. It will remove meta descriptions from page 2 or later of paginated content. This can go either way. The reason that this can be an issue is paginated content in most situations is going to have the meta descriptions. It's going to have the same exact meta description as page 1. So you'd have two versions of a page with the same meta description in Google. Maybe the title's a little bit different. I don't recommend necessarily removing the description for some pages, but you're going to have to test that on your own for your own site's needs. Personally, I say that the descriptions are fine being on there. Googlebot's really good at handling paginated content now. It's a lot better than it used to be. Never shorten long descriptions. As the option suggests, check this to prevent your description from being truncated regardless of its length. So if you write a meta description in here, I'm just going to illustrate what happens. Even if I keep writing, it will truncate the output of the meta description. That way Google doesn't truncate it anyways. I don't care for this option. I wouldn't really recommend using it. Just pay attention when you're writing meta descriptions that you stay at the below the maximum of 160 characters. Redirect attachments to post parent. Yoast SEO has an option that's very similar. It redirects attachment pages to the attachments URL. So it will take the attachment page and then it will look at the image that it's related to and redirect the attachment page to that image. That is the best way of handling it. This is the old way that Yoast SEO used to handle it, but it's better than nothing. And here's the reason why. The one thing you don't want to do is have content on your website that is thin or useless. Attachment pages are a custom post type. All images that you upload to your site are a post. They get added as a custom post type as an attachment / media item. Redirecting them to the post parent or just to the image themselves eliminates the purpose of those pages because they're useless. So I do recommend this option's enabled. You can exclude pages here. They'll be excluded by All In One SEO Pack, which generate their own. So this is useful. As it says here, /forum, /members, /anything that would be from that'd be dynamically generated. The common problem children are BuddyPress and BBPress. Great plugins on their own, but the problem is they generate their own kind of meta descriptions, and SEO plugins don't play well with them. You can exclude the pages here. I recommend doing that if you're using those plugins. Otherwise, you don't really have much use for doing this. You can add additional post headers here, additional page headers, front page headers, and post page headers here. You won't really need to use these options much at all. Then under the keywords settings, you'll be able to enable the meta keywords tag. This should be disabled. It's 2019. No major search engine uses the keywords tag. In fact, those who do are frequently just spammed with it, and there's no benefit. If you're using the meta keywords tag still in 2019, I suggest removing it. It's been exploited to the point that it was killed off. Update your options. And now we're going to come back to this and we're going to look at the feature manager. So the feature manager allows you to enable specific additional options within All-in-One SEO Pack that you might need or you might not need. I'm going to enable all of them. I'm going to walk through all of them, and I'm going to go back to that performance tab once these are all active as well. And the reason for that is there's some cool features in here that frankly should just be enabled by default. I don't understand why they've broken it down to these modules. There is a pro version, which gives you a video sitemap and additional extra content. I'm only reviewing the free version today, so we're just going to pretend that it's not there. Performance section. You'll be able to change some default habits on WordPress that are not necessarily smart. The raise the memory limit is very important. As you can see, you can raise the amount of PHP memory limit for WordPress. However, the fact that it only goes to 256 megabytes is a little low. Complicated websites such as WooCommerce might need 512 megs. I have it set to 768 megs for all sites. You can also raise your execution limit, which in most situations you shouldn't do. The default is probably where you should be. Unless you have some service or script that is very inefficient and keeps timing out, there's no reason to ever increase your execution time. Outside of that, we're now jumping into the Xml Sitemap. So Xml Sitemaps are very important from an SEO perspective. They will allow Googlebot to easily crawl the content of your website. You should always have an XML sitemap. HTML sitemaps are a little less important now, as Google has said, but XML sitemaps are still very much important. It's the easiest way for search engines to easily discover your content. You can also create an RSS sitemap in addition to the regular sitemap. There's no real downside to doing this. It's just another sitemap. So you can go ahead and create the RSS sitemap. It's not going to do you any harm. It's not going to really do you much any benefit, but it's there. Enable sitemap indexes. This should be enabled. An index is like a sitemap of sitemaps. So if you have a really large site and it's constantly growing, by splitting up the content into separate sitemaps within an index, you allow the sitemap to be easily crawlable and easily manageable. You'll be able to actually go through and read it as opposed to getting a very large list of giant sitemaps. This option should always be enabled. And the best part is when you use sitemap indexes, you only need to submit the index to Google. And Google, as well as Bing, will crawl all the sitemaps that are within there. The maximum number of posts per sitemap page doesn't really matter too much. If you have a really large site, you might need to decrease the setting to something that's more manageable. This could then save you in terms of performance and just be easier for your server to process. Otherwise, the 1000 limit default is just fine. A lot of people, their sites will never have 1000 posts to even worry about. Post types that should be in there. Your posts in your pages, but your attachment pages should be in there. For your taxonomies, the formats should not be in there. Formats are useless, and they frankly shouldn't even be bothered. Since we marked the author pages to be indexable, we're going to want to include those in the sitemap. We marked the date archive pages as no index, so we don't want to include them. We want images to be loaded, so don't check this option. And you want to dynamically generate the sitemap instead of using a static file. You include additional URLs here that might not be managed through WordPress. So maybe you had an old site that was based in HTML. You can still include those URLs in here as an additional page into the sitemap. Excluded items, you can exclude terms, pages, and other content here. For priorities, you don't really need to override them. Most sitemaps don't really pay attention to the priorities or frequency markups anymore, but they're still there. So you can update it. And then if you want to make sure, you can just view your XML sitemap here. So my post, my page, my author, and my category. If you click the post, hello world, there's no images. If you go to the page sitemap, my home page is there and it has the images included. Simple, sweet, and to the point. Good, it's a good functionality. Then we have the social meta. Social meta is increasingly important. Every SEO plugin should have this functionality in it in 2019 because I almost forgot what year it was. Because social media is going to be one of your largest sources of content, of traffic for your content. So I'm going to briefly run through all this. For the homepage settings, you can use the description items that you set on your homepage via here. Over here, we're going to reload our edit page now, just so we can see what's changed. So since we enabled the sitemap functionality and we enabled those social tools, our new page is looking a little bit nicer. So as you can see, the sitemap description that we set up is auto-generated and it's truncated. And then we can now exclude on the individual post the item from the sitemap. And now we have this new tab called Social Settings. Social Settings will allow you to set specific content to display to your social media profiles. So on this home page, you typically want to have your title, your description. When you modify these settings, these are going to be the titles and the descriptions only for social media when you share. So that little snippet that you see on Facebook when you share a link, that's what this will control. You also want to set an image that's going to be large enough for Facebook. I'm just going to set this image for the sake of simplicity. And you can want to have a description that draws them. Most of the time, the default description for a page isn't going to be enough for users to want to click on your content. And now you can specify image width and height. This is something that Yoast SEO does automatically, but you do want to declare the image width and height. It won't prevent the snippet from showing if you don't, but it's a recommended item that is added. Then you can add a custom video URL. Now, if you have a video Facebook for uploaded via YouTube or in your post, include the URL here, and on social media profiles, they should be able to play that video directly from your snippet. Then the Facebook object type, you can set it to be in activity. Under activities, it can be activity, sport, business. In most situations, you just go to website and then just mark it website. Because the object type is, as it says, describes the content of this page or post. In most situations, these options aren't going to do anything. Under the Twitter card type, you can use a large image and upload the image here, and so on and so forth. I'm just going to go back in here now and just briefly run through all these settings so that way you can see. So as we established, you can upload your home image here, but since we're using a static page, we would edit the page directly. Under the image settings, use the featured image as your default. Most posts are going to have a featured image. You can do the first attached image, but if you don't have an image attached, you'll almost always have a featured image. I recommend just using the featured image. And then use the default image if there's absolutely no image found, and just stick a nice generic kind of image there that's kind of branded. That way there's something there for when content is shared on social media, even if there's none found in the post. Otherwise, you can declare the image width and the height. You can use a custom field for the image, but there's no real benefit to you doing that. In almost all situations, your theme is going to make use of featured images, and that's what you should use. The only content that might not use a featured image is going to be your subpages. So an actual page very well might not use a featured image. For your Facebook settings, Facebook Open Graph tags say that having an admin ID and an app ID is required. However, I have never seen the difference if it is added or not. So while I recommend you fill these out by setting up a Facebook app, most people don't, and it doesn't really seem to impact them. So at the bare minimum, go through and set the rest of these settings up, but these are recommended. As these automatically generate article tags for Facebook type article when not provided. If you have tags, you can use the keywords and article tags, which is your meta keywords. Don't use this. I would recommend using categories and tags for adding article tags for Facebook. Enable Facebook meta for post types. Only do it on post types that are published and indexable. So post pages, don't do it for any of these other nonsense post types. Show the Facebook publisher on articles. You want to include your Facebook profile URL here for the Facebook page. Now, there is a sub option for showing the Facebook author on articles. The Facebook author setting has to be done under the author, under your user profile. You will see a link to paste your author or individual Facebook page there. This option is seldomly used. It's not necessarily an advantage, but when you publish an article on Facebook, it will say by your actual Facebook name, and then it'll be a link to your social media profile. Depending on how you've branded your social media profile, maybe you've got one that's personal, one that's professional, it will allow users to interact with you and follow you. The only downside is this, they will be following you. So use the option if you want. Just be wary that you are trying to go for a more professional Facebook page instead of a more personal one. For the post object type, it should almost always be article. Pages object type, article is fine. You could do website for it. Either way, it's not going to really change much. Under the Twitter settings, again, I recommend using the summary with large image. The reason for that is summary with large image just draws more clicks. You want to, for it says your Twitter site, which is just your Twitter username associated with the website. Paste that here. Show the Twitter author. which, as it mentions, allows your authors to be identified with their Twitter usernames as content creators on the Twitter cards for their posts. Just like Facebook, it'll show your name with a link to your Twitter page. Advanced settings. You can run the short codes in the title, description, or use content for auto-generate open graph description. This option should be enabled. This option should be enabled solely because the open graph tag should have something there as opposed to being empty. So this should be enabled. I don't really recommend running either one of these options, but you can. And if you do, you'll know why you're doing that. Under the robots.txt setting, there's not a lot that you need to do here. These options are fine, and the sitemap, including the link, is fine. There's not a whole lot of reason to optimize the robots.txt anymore, because any content that you don't want indexed should be marked as no index. Under the file editor, you can modify your htaccess file, which it's just a functionality that's in Yoast SEO as well. They both allow you to modify the content that is in here. There's not really a whole lot of reason to modify an htaccess file from your WordPress admin panel, but if you need to add just a quick little rule, it can be done here. Importer and exporter. This is actually really cool. This will allow you to import and export the settings for all-in-one SEO pack. So if you're setting up multiple websites, or you have a general input file, let's say you make smarter default settings for every website, you can export all of that here for, say, the post types that people are actually going to always have, posts and pages, and then you can import that later. Or if you're, say you're going to swap to a different SEO plugin one day, so you deactivate and delete all-in-one SEO pack, and you want to run an experiment with a different SEO plugin, you'll be able to re-import the settings and it will pick up on everything that was there. All in all, it's just a really handy feature. I recommend if you're trying to make a backup of your SEO settings, you just download everything. Check everything, general settings and post data and all post types. Just take them all and then download your exported file. And then you can just re-import it from the same menu. Now there's the bad bot blocker. This is just an odd feature for all-in-one SEO pack, but it's not a bad feature. What this will do is, as it mentions, it will attempt to block bad bots. The functionality itself isn't bad, it's just kind of odd to find it in your SEO plugin. But block requests from user agents that are known to misbehave. This will just help prevent spam bots from going to your website. That way your server has more resources, and thus when Googlebot's trying to index it, it can crawl more pages. Block referral spam using HTTP. Track blocked bots. This doesn't need to be enabled, but if you want to see if it's blocking anything for real, it will be able to spit out a little bit of a log that says X amount of bots were blocked and these were the user agents. You can also use a custom block list, which if enabled, you can put in the user agent to block. And the referrer block list allows you to put the URL that's being referred to your site. Handy little functionality, just a little odd in a SEO plugin. And that's about it. That is effectively everything you should need to know for all-in-one SEO pack. Do I recommend it? It's a good plugin. There's nothing wrong with all-in-one SEO pack. No SEO plugin is going to make your site any better than one site over the other. Some people swear by Yoast, some people swear by all-in-one. Personally, I have my own preferences. All-in-one SEO pack, though, I've never experienced issues with. It's a great plugin, great author. They update their site, their plugin regularly, it needs a little bit of a user interface refresh. There's a lot of options here that frankly I just don't think are necessary, and it could definitely be streamlined, but it's a good plugin. If you're using it, continue using it. I don't think that you're going to see any large improvement from one SEO plugin over another. That being said, that's all you need to know about All-in-One SEO Pack. Great plugin, tons of options, and once you get the hang of it, a really effective plugin. If you have any questions about it, you can feel free to ask me in the comments below. If you need any support for the plugin, you can go to their WordPress.org page. They're very active over there. And I thank you so much for watching.